Hello everyone and welcome back. Here we are with Season 3 of Placing Faces, the show where we sit down with some of the most influential casting directors in all of Hollywood and across the entertainment spectrum. I am your host, Charlie Chappell, and before we get into who we're going to speak with today, I just want to thank you all for your support and messages throughout this project. We hit some metaphorical walls last year, medical issues and setbacks that slowed down our production, but your kind words and reaching out really helped carry us through. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart, and we're really happy to be back. I promise to keep making this show as long as casting directors will have us, and you will keep listening. That being said, we have started a new Patreon, and I know, another thing asking you for money. Well, look, truth be told this is a labor of love for Maria and I, and love don't buy sandwiches. We're going to keep making this show no matter what, and personally, I don't need a sandwich myself, but I'd really love to be able to pay Maria for all the work that she does, and to hire an editor to help us get these episodes out more efficiently than I've been able to on my own. I don't want anything from you other than to be able to keep making this show, so with my word, any money we make goes back into making this show, making more episodes, and bringing you more content and opportunities to build a community around celebrating these wonderful casting directors. You can check it out at patreon.com/placingfaces. And I promise that is all I will say about that. Now we get to the good stuff. Today, we get to chat with casting director and president of the Casting Society of America, that is right, El Presidente himself, Russell Boast. Russell, who hails from South Africa, has a very unique intro into the business, from the theater world near Durban to working with tribes in Africa, and coming all the way to Hollywood to cast and become an advocate for casting directors all over the world. This is truly an episode I think you're really going to enjoy. He's cast projects like Chance on Hulu and Insatiable on Netflix, Wicked City, Dark Web, and a whole lot more. We discuss the importance of opportunity and being able to see yourself in the media that we consume, and giving casting directors the voice to be seen and heard in today's media landscape. We are extremely happy to be back and to start this season out with such a lovely human. I hope you enjoyed listening to Russell as much as I enjoyed speaking with him, and I hope that you learn as much as I did. The best place to start with these things is at the beginning. So where'd you come from and how did you get here?
So I'm from South Africa originally, born and raised in South Africa, and I grew up on a small farm, really a farm in Africa. We had one gas station and one school, and I remember when the Wimpy, it was like the first burger store came to town. Like, we were a farming community, probably an hour away from the big city, which was Durban, but it was really, really small community of farmers is really where I came from.
Farming what?
So we did hydroponics back then, which was just growing vegetables was the big thing then. Mm-hmm. But everyone had chicken and cattle and horses, and it was that kind of world.
Yeah. What did growing up on a farm teach you?
I just wanted to get to the big city as soon as possible, and I always had a love for the arts and theater, and just the big city had a big theater where touring productions from around the world used to come into Durban.
Is it a small community in that
world?
So
I was very fortunate because theater when I was a kid in South Africa was there was a lot of money was being spent on theater at that time in Africa, and the availability of these touring productions, these international touring productions that would come off the West End mainly, and the West End productions like Les Mis or Cats or The Phantom, they were bringing those shows straight out from the West End, and we had these huge theaters that have been built when the Brits came to South Africa, and they could support the technology of those shows.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very fortunate to be able to not only to get to see those productions, but then slowly but surely get to work on those productions. I remember I did my job when Les Mis first came to town. I was like the mic boy. My job was to make sure that all the lead actors' radio mics were on and working, and I was available to switch them out the minute they weren't working, which, back then happened quite a lot. But I remember.
So you're used to the issues that we just had here.
Yeah, exactly. I got to like hide behind like set pieces and just wait for them to come off stage and then switch the battery out. It was like incredible for me. I'm like, oh my God, I'm on fire. If it wasn't for me, no one would be hearing these people right now. Kind of like casting,
Yeah. You say you kind of fell into casting. When did you realize that it was the thing?
I did. The kind of work that I did was extraordinary back then, and it wasn't essentially casting. I got a reputation for being someone who was not afraid to just go to a foreign country and find non-actors and get them ready for Hollywood or international pictures. One of my first big ones was a movie called Beyond Borders with Clive Owen and Angelina Jolie, and that movie, my job was to go to Namibia, find 1,500 people who wanted to work as extras who didn't know what being an extra was, train them up, get them kind of camera ready in order to get into first positions, second positions, like exactly what rolling meant, just kind of training non-actors up to be either in these crowd scenes or featured actors in the piece. And I didn't know at the time, it wasn't necessarily casting, but it was finding the non-actors, making them actors, training them up to understand what it was going to be like on a shoot, on the day on set. And then the best thing about it that I still miss being a casting director here is then you got to stay and be an AD on the production, because then you were responsible for payments, signing the actors and making sure they got to set, being their driver. You were almost like a second AD that went all the way through to wrap, which we don't get to do now. Now I'm like, the minute the cast is signed off, I've just worked on a production now, and I just did my last deal memo in the car on the way down here, and now they're done with me, and I sent it, and I said, I was like, have fun, have a great shoot. I said, it reminded me of my days back in Africa where day one of shooting was like when I got the busiest, and now it's like, okay, on to the next project. But no, it doesn't answer your question, does it?
No, it absolutely does.
I got in by default. I
didn't
know what it was. I started doing this. I was a casting coordinator, they called it back in South Africa. And then that led me into going, God, I really want to, the theater bug was like, well, why have you forgotten me? And I was like, oh, what's the scripted thing? Oh, scripted, this sounds like being on stage, and then it was like, oh, actors doing lines. Oh, now I'm in the room, into taking the experience that I'd had with non-actors and getting them camera ready, and then taking my theater experience and going, okay, now I have actors presenting dialogue. Is there a world in which those two experiences of mine can come together? And they did, loud and clear. And I was giving actors notes based on giving non-actors notes, and it was the same thing. It was, it was really like the same thing. I have a lot of crazy stories, but I worked with this tribe called the Himba for a while, getting them camera ready for a film called The Trail. And the Himba, there's only 1,200 of the people left. They live in rural Namibia, and I got to get a translator. I got to meet the chiefs and the tribes. I got to get their earn their trust, and then get them ready for this big international production. And today I'll be in the room and I'll be talking to an actor, and I'll tell them that story, and they'll be like, what does this have to do with me? And I'm like, storytelling all started around a fire. And when I did the work with that tribe, we sat around the fire, and I said, okay, tell them to reenact herding today, herding a sheep, but the sheep gets lost. All right, now no, stop. Now go back to first position. Okay, now the sheep's running a little faster. Go, action. And it's exactly what I do today. The sense of it is the same. And the essence of it is exactly the same thing.
But that early training of doing that,
and
also you're dealing with infinitely different types of human beings.
Right. Yeah, and never seen a television, never seen money. I mean, we ended up working out a payment system for some of the villages where we bought cattle into the villages because that was the currency in the villages.
What an interesting way to come up. How do you create that trust in that type of situation?
It's something that it's hard to explain what it is. It's kind of, it came with me. People, I don't.
I mean, you have a very trustworthy face, and
We talked about
yeah.
an agenda earlier, and I think it's a lot to do with the fact that I don't really come with an agenda, and that another thing my grandfather said to me at some point was, what do you want to, when you die, what do you want to have achieved? And I remember thinking for a minute and then being like, I want to have been in as many people's shoes as possible by the time I die, and by the time I'm standing at my grave, and I didn't know what that meant, but I remembered saying it out loud to him, and then I look at my life now and I go, oh, that's exactly what I do. I try and embody people I don't know or who don't feel like me or who don't sound like me in order to not be a better human being. That just sounds wrong, but but in order to live a full life, is really what it is for me, and it's full circle always to casting, because that's what we do. That's really what we do, is we get to really focus on a particular role. We get to focus on a particular type of actor. We get to focus on a particular style of script, whatever it is, and then I get to be in those shoes for that minute, and then I can take them off and change them.
So you put on the shoes of the character that you're casting.
So no, not so much that. It's more like putting on the space. So it's putting on with the physical. What's the environment? Learning. God, it's longer than I think it is ago now. But we were doing Wicked City, the ABC show, short-lived ABC show, and one of the writers around the awards season called us up and said, we've got a great idea. We're gonna put a trans woman character in the next episode. So I'm giving you a heads up, because that role is going to be really hard to cast, And I remember at the time being like, oh God, I just know what this is going to be, because we were set in like the 80s, the Sunset Strip. I was like, this is going to be a hooker or a drug dealer. Like, it's going to be bad, and I'm going to have to deal with that. And I don't know anything about the trans community, but my gut is telling me this is going to be hard. And we got the script, and she wasn't. She was just a document forger. There was nothing to do with it. She was a document forger, and there was no commentary about
it. Wasn't
the
token.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, this is a win, And then I was like, the trans community. Now, I'm a gay man. I have a husband and 2 kids, and I was like, I don't know one trans person. I'm like, that's not okay, And then given my life experience, I'm like, wait a minute, this is not okay. 6 months just getting into those shoes, man, finding the trans community the same, earning their trust, and then falling in love with these people, these human beings that I just had never been part of my world, and then being able to go back to the industry who's full of fear and go like, hey guys, I've got some great ideas for you and some terrific actors, and this is what we're going to do, right? I find myself in these situations a lot in my life.
Yeah, and like you're running towards them.
Exactly. Yeah, I kind of like, I'm just stand there and wait for the next train to come. And I was like, I'm on this train right now, but in a good and a positive way,
Yeah.
I think I was on a panel at TIFF recently, and I think Zita Gonzalez said, we all started to laugh because this diversity conversation it's like, the word diversity became a big thing 5 years ago. And, and I always think about that, because this all, to me, happened 5 years ago. Yeah. And it's this wave of energy is something that came into my world, and I'm just like, I felt it, and I felt familiar, and it felt like it was putting me on the track to do good with what I do, how I earn money, and I was like, this feels like why I was put on this planet, and here we go, and the rest is almost history until we have to stop talking. We can stop talking about diversity, which I'd love to do at some point in the future.
To stop talking about it, because it's no longer a problem.
It's not a conversation piece anymore.
Yeah, because it's just the way things are.
I look at my kids now, and I have 2 beautiful adopted boys, and we're always like, okay, how are the kids going to be if another kid ask questions about, where's your mom, or you have 2 dads, or whatever, and every time I try and address it with my 5-year-old, he looks at me like, Dad, like, I have 2 dads, that's it. Like, and then he goes to kindergarten, and then at kindergarten he's like, I hear him being like, I have two dads. I'm like, okay, he's fine. It's us, it's me going,
Because we come from
Correct.
a society or those sort of things that.
There's the unconscious bias, man. And I'm
Yeah,
like, I
right.
think that as the world expands and as the media gets to really, really, really open the hearts and minds of kids and adults as to what the world really does look like, and not the way the world has been shown on television previously. I think that our kids it's gonna go away. It's gonna become one thing eventually, which is my hope.
And I mean, if so, you, I don't know if we've mentioned it yet, but you are the president of the Casting Society of America. You are very committed to inclusion and diversity, and it seems like it's something that has inherently been a part of you throughout your career, but now there's a focus on that. And oftentimes in these conversations, we talk about like the negative aspects of it, where we're not,
Right.
which is important.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong. I'm
Sure.
fully aware that I am a white straight fella, but I think I want to frame a little bit of the conversation in how much better are we doing than even 5 years ago, and is there a good outlook for this? Are we headed towards that?
I think I want to, yes, I want to say yes. I want to say yes, absolutely. I'm very mindful of what we know as the pendulum swing, and the swing is, it's a fad, and it's all the rage right now, and then suddenly it's not talked about again. So I'm very conscious of that, and I'm in my own world and in the CSA world, I'm trying to put some tools in place that not only address present circumstances, but also look to the future. For example, together with my diversity team at the CSA, we spearheaded these open calls, and we did an open call for the trans community, and open call for performers with disabilities, and open call for Manasseh, which is Middle Eastern, North African, South Asian, and then our next big open call is for Native American and Indigenous people in January next year, and the open calls are. It's for me. It's an exploration of discovering actors who haven't been discovered in these minority or diverse communities. Is 20% of it. 60% of it is giving casting directors the experience in the room with these actors that they may or may not have had experience with, so that they walk out of their office, out of the open calls, and on Monday start talking to their showrunners and producers, which is the other percentage of it, about this incredible day they've had. So the writers producers go back to their writers' rooms and say, you know what my casting director did over the weekend? Well, they just saw this community, and then it all kind of spirals out, and a lot of actors are like, oh, I still haven't been called in from that open call, and I'm like, just this time, it's not about you. This time it's about a much bigger plan that I have, So that is so
Easing fears and easing
kind of
ignorance?
Like, that's easing fears, easing ignorance, giving casting directors the tools to have some kind of authority when it comes to being inclusive, and I think because then they become more comfortable having conversations like, why don't we make this role a wheelchair user? Why don't we make this role a trans woman? And this is what it means to do that, And in all of that, I look at that and I go, sounds great. To your question, it looks great right now, but what if this is what happens when I'm gone and all of the people that are helping me and believe in this are gone and doing something else with their lives? The next thing for me is to really be creating the next generation of diverse casting directors, and together also with my training team, we put together the first of its kind training program for casting professionals, people who are interested in a career in casting, and I'm hell-bent, man. We do 12 to 16 candidates per program. It's only for people who are seriously interested in pursuing casting, and our first beta test was a deaf assistant, a trans woman, a trans man. I like those are the people that I want to see on my training program, because I want to see those people in offices and those people becoming casting directors. And that's how I if I can successfully make that happen, I can happily stand in my grave, have filled everyone's shoes, jump in, and know that the work will continue, because it's not going to not continue if a picture of the CSA in 5 or 10 years' time looks completely different to a picture of the CSA as it would now, you know. So, you know, that's my dream. In the same breath, it's also discovering and nurturing those actors from those different communities. It's one thing to say hire an autistic kid for this role. It's another to find a kid who can embody that role. And when I hear in the business, oh, those actors don't exist, you know, that's why we can't we want to do the right thing. We've seen everyone, but they don't exist. And I'm like, people say that with such ease without going, who created that problem and why don't they exist and what are we doing about that? It's always my thing is okay, if you're telling me your list of top trans female actors, trans actors are there's Laverne and then, you know, there's a list of them, and that's it, then what are we doing about that? Like, we can't keep saying it for the next 10 years and then still saying, and we haven't, well, they're not going to bank our movie, you know, it's not going to bring people box office numbers in, which is not true, by the way, because diverse communities make money at the box office. Movies that are authentically cast make a lot of money, and I think people are waking up to that. But that's a side note.
No, I think it's a good side note, and I kind of want to drill down on that. What do you mean by authentic casting? Because it's a term that I've seen you use before.
Sure. So for me, it is about really staying true to the role that is written. You know, the role that is written. And in my world, if you haven't really created a piece of work that accurately represents the world or the US or whatever it is, then you should be doing that first and foremost in order for us to then go out and cast authentically. But for me, it is a while ago, I'd say to actors, and I know there's a big debate about this, you know, an actor's job is to be able to play anything. I can play a tree, I can play someone in a wheelchair, I can play, that's what actors get trained to do. I understand that, I agree with that. And it's fine until a minority group has been underrepresented and misrepresented for an incredibly long time over the period of screen history. Then I go, it's not okay to do that anymore. You know, then I go, it's time to change that. Because roles have come few and far between for the trans community or wheelchair users or anyone, performers, anyone, any of the minority groups, because those roles come few and far between, when they do come, that group should get first dibs on those roles, you know. And I will say in one breath, you should always hire the best actor for the role, and in the other breath, I will say, but you have to do the work to get to the best actor. So just saying, oh, so-and-so is the best actor for this role is not good enough for me. I want to see all the paperwork. I want to see all the actors you've seen in order to get yourself to that point of this is the right person for that role. If you've done the homework and you've seen every actor in town, I'm happy to say, great, you did a great job, you did your best, but we're still here. And this actor's not a wheelchair user. This is Jeffrey Tambor, who then stood up and did a lot of vocal supporting of the trans community. You know, then you end up in that world. But you have to do the work. If you don't do the work, then that person is not the best actor for the role. That's the easiest actor to cast for the role. And you just took the easy route.
Yeah.
You know.
Is that part of these training programs? Is that the diversity programs that you're doing and those sort of things?
So no, the training is specifically to be in casting.
To be in casting.
Okay. And that really is because there's no formalized training for casting. There's a couple of small programs here and there at some of the universities, but there's no focused career building program for people who want to be in the field of casting. You know, we were all self-taught, you know, and like in the way that Hollywood got itself into trouble by a bunch of people who look and felt the same, creating the studios and then working together and then hiring people who looked and felt the same to them. Casting has been the same thing. It's been, you know, you get in by default, you know someone who knows someone. My story is a little crazier than everyone else's, but generally you wanted to be an actor and then didn't want to be an actor and then worked in New York, which I'm so proud of my past, but I sometimes look at the casting community here and I'm like, God, I missed a whole section of professional theater and bring in New York in order to bring that to my skill set, but I bring a whole different skill set with me now. So the training program is it's specifically about being in casting.
Well, how did those programs come about, and how do people get involved?
So we, 5 years ago, we were in a long-term planning meeting for the CSA, and the organization had kind of, in my mind, come to a point where it had done a lot of good. And I think that at the time, the leadership of the organization wasn't 100% sure what to tackle next. And I happened to had just become a board member then, and 6 years ago, very vocal Russell decided that he was going to have a lot to say about what's going to happen with the organization, and the first thing was going to be training and education, and just because even back then and now more so, I think that it's not about formalizing the training and saying this is the way to be a good casting director. It's more about understanding how and what we do and historically where we come from, so we can talk to the industry about what it is casting directors do.
Again, alleviating the ignorance.
Just in order to receive those accolades we're not receiving, people are not going to award you for something they don't understand. If they don't know what it is, or they don't know what it is you do, and you don't know how to explain it, and casting directors are terrible explaining what they do to people. My mom, I think my mom still doesn't really know. It's hard to explain what we do, and I thought that the training program not only would then create a different behind-the-scenes look, available casting directors that were diverse behind the scenes, but also give us more tools to talk about what we do and how we do it. I had a producer a while ago who I was explaining how a breakdown or how putting out how what we do. And they were mind-boggled. And this is a producer who has been in the business for a very long time and had just never sat down and said, so how does your day work? They really just think we picked up our phone and called a couple of actors and said, come in and meet our director, Like, oh, there's a lot more that happens during the course of the day, So yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, we talked a little bit about it before we started recording, but it's like BAFTA.
Right.
Coming along those lines, and the communication of what you do as casting directors is super important in that consideration.
Yeah, and so I stole a lot of this from the Australian Guild of Casting Directors. Their president and I were on the call, and she said that's how they got their award. She said they were at a table, she was in the right place at the right time, and someone turned and said, well, what is it that you guys actually do? And then she explained it, and she said everyone was like gobsmacked. And 5 hours later, it wasn't 5 hours, but in the movie version of this, 5 hours later, there it was. They were getting an award for casting on Australia, I really do believe that has so much to do with it. And also because, and this is back to my story about how I used to stay on set and that I miss that, is we kind of do, we we invite everyone to this beautiful cruise liner, right? And we set everyone up and we give them rooms and we make sure they're in the right accommodation and we make sure that everything's set for sail, and then they set sail and we just stand at shore and let them go, and that's day one of shooting. And by the time the cruise liner comes back, most people have forgotten who you are.
Yes,
absolutely. By the time they hit the shore again, because they've spent intense weeks together, they've spent this time together, they've been 12-hour days and just craziness and thunderstorms and all these stories we hear that happen on set that we hear 6 months after the movie's been shot. We don't get to share that as a family with them, and I think that does us, in a way, also does us kind of a disservice. I talk about it all the time, and people forget that we're the first ones in, man. That pilot gets picked up, or that script gets greenlit, and the first thing that happens is either the casting director gets called directly if they have a good relationship with the producers, or the producers are put in front of 3 or 4 casting directors to interview, and it's probably one of the first heads of department that they meet is casting, right? And they poor showrunners who are like all excited, and they've got picked up to pilot, and then we have to hold their hands while everyone else gets involved and all the other voices get involved, and things change before we get to the first day of shooting. We get to be a part of a very exciting time, and for me it's an honest time, and it's a time where if you have a really great relationship with your director or your showrunners, where so much creative work gets done. that doesn't get forgotten about, but it just kind of gets left behind at the shore when the ship sets sail.
Yeah, it's interesting. We interviewed Kirsty McGregor.
Right, Kirsty is who I was talking about.
She's one. And her
Okay, good.
her insight is incredible. If you haven't listened to that episode, go listen to it. It's fucking awesome. She's awesome. I really enjoyed talking with her, but the way she framed it was it made a whole lot of sense.
Right.
After you shoot and you're having the conversations, you're on the panels and the director's talking about working with the actors, they can't very well say, yeah, we went to with like 3 other people before we landed on Josiah because he was the no, you can't do that.
Right.
You have to be, there's a bit of a game that you have to play. There's a bit of a presentation to all of it, in that, again, I don't associate it with malice very often. There are some cases when there is malice, and if you watch Casting By, you'll see some of that malice. That there is, it's just part of it. And the way she framed it and the way it made it understandable also then, because we talked about the Casting Guild of Australia Awards there. And once you do understand that, then you start to, then you can drill down. It's putting on those shoes and having that conversation and removing the ignorance to it that I think is, that's the purpose of this show.
Right.
Is to, honestly, it was to get rid of my ignorance. I had no clue what the casting process was. Right. And I started to find out that there were a lot more ignorances that I needed to drill into. So it's been fairly interesting. Just
it's so funny because it's I'm glad you brought up Casting By, and if anyone's listening and has not seen it, please go and see it. Please see it. It's such an important piece of art.
Give that woman her Oscar.
And for me, it's an important piece of art, and the students that come onto our training program, they have to watch it as pre-course work, and then we break it down on day one, and that will forever remain in the program. And the reason for that is because with technology these days and the way that we can do business as casting directors in terms of the amount of actors who have access to us, the amount of actors we can schedule and move around, and a lot of the self-taping and online technology and all those things is while it's making the business efficient, it's losing the soul of the business. We're losing our souls, and our souls are the Marians of the world who can say to a producer, no. I know what you're trying to do here, but this is a much better idea. Listen to me, please trust me and listen to me on this one. And then the rest, I'll let you have 3 others, but this particular one, this is mine, and this is what we're going to do here. Because 9 times out of 10, it's those moments that have created the magic, have created the James Deans, have created the whoever it is. Those moments of magic are those moments that then the producers take on and go, that was the best idea I ever had, and I'm fine. I will let them have it, without vocal casting directors and without casting directors who love the theater and love actors and are willing to stand up and say, no, I think you're making a mistake right now on this role. We're just processors, and we've been accused of being processors before in the business, and we've been accused of being administrators, and it's an administrative function. And I'm like, please don't ever let us become administrators again if we have ever been. And the way we do that is we go to theater, we become friends with actors, we fight for actors, we fight for diversity, we fight for art, because we are artists and we are part of that creative process. And when we get into the zone of presenting for people and having them pick one, I feel like I'm pushing paper, and I'm not in the business to push paper. I'm in the business to really say, this is why this guy's better over this guy. This is why don't we make the mayor of LA a trans woman? Come on, let's do it. And then I get the looks like, oh, hell no. And then I get the, and then I get the, who have you got, and let's hire her right away, that's what I love about being a casting director, and I would like to think it's what makes me a good casting director,
Is that openness to the potential of and then also the ability to communicate that and fight for that at a certain point.
Yeah, sure. And sometimes people are like, oh, hell no, man.
Sure, absolutely.
Sometimes
It is a creative endeavor. Ultimately, you're going to have
I'm
people who
pretty sure I
disagree
have
sometimes.
one or two producers who have not come back to me because I've had too much to say in the room, and that's fine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about casting directors working together, because two of the casting directors that you've worked with, and pronunciation here, Rick Pagano and Debbie Manweiler.
Correct.
On multiple projects. What is it that makes a casting team work well together?
Oh, it's hard. Rick was my mentor. I would not be here without Rick Pagano. Like he took me under his wing when I got to this country. He sat me at a desk and he said, "Pick up that phone." And I said, "What am I doing?" And he said, "Just pick up the phone and start answering calls." And then really took me on this 8-year journey through the business. Being able to just sit down and answer the phone for someone who at that time had just come off the X-Men movies and was a very prolific, high-profile casting director in this town. And for him to trust me was like, it was a gift for me. I was some kid from Africa who had done all this crazy running around locations casting, So working with Rick, it was a mentorship for me. It wasn't a partnership for me, and Rick and I did feel like partners, and we did theater together, and we loved doing theater together. But for me, working with Rick was really just learning what it meant to be a casting director in this town, and giving me all those tools to be who I am right now, in the US. Deb was, whenever there was an emergency on a TV show, because I was I was still back then pretty level-headed. If there was an emergency on a pilot, then I would get shipped up to the emergency with Rick in the car. He'd be like, "Get in the car. We're going up to Deb," and then we would get in the car. And I always knew it was going to be something pretty dramatic. I think the first time I met Deb, she was on an incredibly stressful show, and her associate had just ended up in the hospital, and I got put at their desk. I'd never ever worked on a TV show before, and Rick marched me and he sat me down and he said, "Just open all the files on the computer. You'll know what to do." And we were in the middle of a pilot, and the phones were ringing, and I remember sitting and opening like folder number 1 and being like, I am so screwed right now, and managed to somehow pull all the wheels back together, and so I became like the fixer. I just wanted to do independent film with Rick. I had no interest in the machine that was television, and then more and more Deb and I started to work together, and we found like I started to get older and I started to think about kids, and then realized that the independent film world was a little more circusy than I thought it was going to be, and I needed to work more in a bank, let's say. And Deb and I just started working together, and we just found a groove there, which is just like a kind of a natural progression from the learning experience, this incredible mentorship I'd had with Rick into working with Deb, who now Deb and I are partners, and like we have, we both live like in the valley, and we both have kids, and her kids are a lot older than mine. But we're not crazy industry folk, And at some point when I first got here, I was like, I'm going to be a crazy industry. I'm going to be West Hollywood with all the agents every Friday, and I'm gonna like Entourage was like they made Entourage about what I saw in my future, And I was like, no, I have other things to do with my life, in terms of the diversity work and the inclusion work and the training work and the raising a family, and Deb has a very similar vibe about that. We love what we do, and we love casting, and we love actors, but we don't have to be at every party every Thursday night,
Yeah.
It's not important,
Did doing that early inform later?
I think so. I think it was hard for me. The first 2 years here was really hard for me.
Was it a big culture shock?
It was a huge culture shock for me. I just had no idea. I didn't know anyone. I knew no one. I had a friend, Deb DeLasso, who is a friend of a friend who I stayed with in Santa Clarita, Newhall, But apart from her, I knew no one. And she was a new friend. I'd known her a couple of months, and she was generous enough to let me stay in her house for 2 years, when I got here. But I knew no one, and didn't know the industry here. Knew what it looked like around the world, but very much on set with international producers and directors, and this whole vibe was LA was incredibly unfamiliar and unfriendly. Yeah, it was hard to find my place here, but mainly because I just wanted to work, and I'd been working for 15 years in the business already, and then I got here, and there was kind of this culture shock, and then the brakes went on because everyone seemed to be talking about these things that we're going to create, and no one seemed to be on set. And I spent a lot of time at lunches and at parties and drink sessions where people were talking about what they were going to do, but no one was shooting anything. And I was like, I'm used to being on set tomorrow at 5 a.m.
Right.
So,
You're talking about shooting something.
yeah,
I'll see you tomorrow.
If you want to, if we're going to do it, then let's do it and tell me where to be at what time.
Yeah.
If we're not going to do it, then let me go and find something else to do. And it's funny because part of that led me into the Equity Waiver 1990 theater world here for a minute, and I started to produce in that world because my soul was being sucked lifeless initially, and then you get to a point in this town where something switches over. Maybe it was when I gave up the desperate desire to be an industry player and just let it be just let it be part of me instead and organically come to me. But there's this paradigm shift that goes from the talking to meeting people who really do the work, and then I found that family, and I'm like, so grateful for the work that I've been able to do so far and all the people that I've met and that are good people and really doing, making movies.
Yeah. I think like finds like out here.
Right.
And after oftentimes because I'm a doer. I
Right.
like to make things, and that's
That's how
as
this
well.
all started.
Right.
Right.
And I think that oftentimes it's hard to find those other doers, but eventually you do. As long as you stick it out and you keep doing and you keep pushing, eventually you just start building up, oh, you're a doer too. We're going to do something together. And then you do that thing together, and they have other doers. And it slowly starts to build on itself. But it is a very hard place to move to. Especially if you don't know anyone here, it is difficult.
And especially, it's for all filmmakers, but for actors in particular, there's so much BS in this town. And it's like, I don't know, I'm sure many of you actors, listeners are actors, and there's so much they called actor myths is what I like to call them, and for a long time when I first got here, I used to teach, and I used to be teaching the business of the business, because I really wanted actors to understand, watch out for those pitfalls. The Headshot Corporation of America just stealing money, and I came so naive and so open-minded, so I just saw what was going on the ground here is like a complete farce, and I didn't, when actors would say and still say to me, which is a better headshot for me, and I'm just like, dude, the one that looks like you, that's it, you're done. I'm done with this conversation, or what are they? My career has leaped to a point where I don't talk in that world as much as I used to, but I used to love talking in that world because I used to say things like, please don't come to me and ask me to hook you up with an agent. An agent's relationship with a casting director is totally different than an actor's one. I can introduce you and they're going to say yes, but are they going to take care of you? I don't know. I want to say maybe not. So there's just this little... Those little triggers, my star meter on IMDb, if I can just push that up a notch, and I'm like, it's such bullshit. Like, we never use the star meter to track actors' success. we use it to make lists of actors who we already know. Like, it's not true. And then I'll see a friend of mine, and they put their IMDb profile link on Facebook, so in the hope that someone will click, in the hope that their numbers will go up, in the hope of what? That I'll skip over their names if I don't know them, if they're not a friend of mine. There's so much of that out in this town, and I'm like, this is what it is. Pay your dues, do the work, be the best actor you can. It's simple. For me, it's so much simpler than what the town says. And I love agents and managers for the most part, but these myths, a lot of the regional locations I'm struggling now with, is CSA wise, because we're getting these things about, these kids are being told that they need Instagram followers and they need Twitter followers and they need to build up their social media. And I'm like, dude, once in almost 2 decades did a producer say to me, who has the biggest following? And it was neck and neck, and the role was a teen role. You know what I mean? Then I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Not in the history of me doing this job has it ever become a thing. Now I understand in in Nickelodeon shows. I understand there is a world where that takes place. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying in my world it doesn't exist, and I've never seen it. So when a manager is telling a 13-year-old to, which I think is dangerous, to be online and be socially present, I go, that's not my conditions. You know, we hear with the CSA, I love the CSA. People love to blame the CSA. The CSA says, no, the CSA never said that. No, but the CSA rules are. I'm like, no, it's not. No, we just like we're a little membership organization. We're a little family of casting directors. We're not a big machine. We're not like the president of the CSA. People introduce me, they're like, who's the president of the CSA? And I'm like, I take it because I get to do good with that, with being the president. I like to think I get to do a lot of good, but we're like every now and then I have to be like, everyone calm down. We're a group of casting directors. Like, that's what we are. We love actors. We're a group of casting directors. That's it. All the rest of it is like, it's like the activists about headshots. Like, so.
Well, speaking about the CSA, this is a good opportunity to delve into that a little bit more. What is the intention of the CSA?
So, it's really is to create a global voice for casting directors is what it is. I mean, you can pull the mission statement off the website, but for me, we've expanded into Europe over the last 2 years. For me, it's about that education about what we do, and being able to talk to our members about what we do, ask them to be more vocal about what we do and how we do it. Leverage this diversity conversation to engage more members, to say doing the right thing is the right thing to do, and it's not even doing the right thing, it's the thing you should have been doing all along anyway, so please just do it. For me, it's really to elevate the profession of casting and casting directors, and then really take care of the community, and it's a tough business. Like, it doesn't matter what part of the business you're in. Being in this industry can be soul destroying, and you're on a wave and you're doing great, and you're 3 pilots and the one's going to get picked up and the other one, and then nothing happens, and you have to deal with that, and you have to pick yourself up and you have to get on with it, and it's the same when you're so close to hiring an actor, and it's going to happen, and then something happens, someone says no, and that actor's not going to be doing your show, and you have to go to another actor. Like, it really is the ability to pick up and move on. Requires therapy and help, and the CSA become a support mechanism for each other. We get to call each other now. I think when I joined the board, it was a little more closed house, I want to say. It was a little more, we didn't share as much information as we do now. Now we pick up the phone to each other and we say, hey, this is, how do you feel about what just went down with this producer? And we share stories and we commiserate, and that's really, apart from all of the great work we do. We have Casting Society Cares, we do a lot of community work, taking care of our members and then elevating the craft is really what it is, is what my mission has become. And then my own soapbox, which I jump up on, is the inclusion and diversity and the training and education.
Yeah.
Because I've found myself in this position of where it's not authority or power, where people might be listening to me, maybe, and while they're listening, I'm going to have my say about inclusion and diversity and training the next generation of diverse casting directors. That's what it is.
Yeah. I'm curious a little bit, and you've discussed it a bit about why you got those specific soapboxes, but I'm curious. It's one thing to join an organization and be part of the organization, but to then join the board of that organization and work your way to president, and you were just elected for the second term?
Right, yes.
As president of the organization. There's another level of involvement and care that comes with that. And I'm curious for you, why?
My short answer is someone has to do it. Someone has to do it, is the short answer of it. I love the CSA and I love the members, and I love what this organization is now doing. when I originally joined the board of directors, it was because I wanted to know what they were actually doing. And, I'm one of those guys that I had the 3 letters behind my name and I was paying dues and I'm like, this is cool. I'm from Africa and I've got CSA behind my name. Like, it's so cool, And then I was like, the next year of dues payment came around and I was like, so what is this actually about? Like, I think it looks cool on screen. So I got into the board of directors, then quickly found out that there was all this work that was happening, and then there was some areas where work wasn't happening, and the place where I felt like the work had been happening. Like one of our previous presidents, Pam Dixon, she was this inclusion and diversity thing. Like I'm still struggling to fill Pam's shoes in it. She started that machine, and I would never ever say that I started that machine. She started and then she just left her shoes at the door for me, and I jumped into those shoes. True story. And she would love that. But I saw those opportunities to look at some of the mistakes that the industry had historically made, some of the inaccuracies that have been portrayed in terms of diversity, and I was like, well, what's this diversity committee doing? I'm like, hold on a minute, let me just start. Let's have a conversation about the diversity committee. And Leah Daniels Butler and Michael Sanford and I went and had coffee at Aurora Cafe, and and we started this machine that has become these open calls. Has become like it's bigger than we ever imagined. We had 3 things on the agenda. We had unconscious bias, and we had that how are we going to deal with the fact that these actors don't exist, or this myth of the actors don't exist, and then what are we going to do about that? And those were the 3 agenda items, and now it's turned into this machine of 15 committee members that work tirelessly at hundreds of different things, whether it's work sessions with performance disabilities, or it's doing open calls or town halls, or like New York's on fire. My New York committee is like, I can't pick up the phone and they're doing 100 different things, That was just me sitting in a boardroom 8 years ago being like, what we should do, and then with a wonderful casting director friend of mine, Gohar Gasazian, and Gohar and I were the ones who were at that long-term planning meeting, looked at each other and were like, training and education, why don't we just make a training program? Little did we know that it was going to be hours and hours of work to put this training program together, which is still in beta test. It's going to be 80 hours, and we've launched 24 of it, and we were about to launch the next 30. We've still got God knows how many hours to develop. That was all from sitting in a boardroom going, okay, what are we doing next with this organization? What can we do? And then for me, thinking about the fact that we were in this unique position of being in the room when there's a director in the same room, where there's a showrunner in the same room, where there's a writer in the same room, and going like, whenever the diversity blame game got passed around, that should be the writer, it should be the writer. I was like, we are the ones that are in the room with all of those people. We should say something, anything, So that started that train. The presidency for me, it really was because someone has to do it. I think by then I learned so much about myself being part of this organization personally, and having to manage so many personalities and take care of so many people. I learned a whole new skill set that that wasn't available to me, in terms of not being patient, because I'd always been patient, but the ability to challenge, to listen, and then to challenge, and then every now and then to say no, which has never been part of my toolbox, and to be able to gently say no and explain why it's something that I will take away, because I term out in a year and a half. I'll take away from this organization is just that the love for the community, what we can do with the casting world, what the casting world can actually do, the impact it can have on the entire industry, and in turn the entire world, because everyone's watching television and films. That's what gets me up in the day, and all the tough calls and all the dealing with personalities during the course of the day is worth every minute of it, because the CSA as I know it can change the world. I'm like, okay, I'm on that train,
I do. It's like you said. It's the first point of entry into the filmmaking process. Once green light happens, casting is involved, and if something isn't being said at that point, it's not going to be said. Like you're past that point.
Yeah.
You also have the RDOS Awards, which the 35th anniversary is coming up this
Coming up,
next
it's
year.
going to be the biggest one to date, and last year we had over 1,000 people. Like, we sold out.
Because you have simultaneous events, one in New York and one in LA.
And London now.
And London now.
So we have
Oh,
London,
great.
New York, and Los Angeles now. It is a ton of work, and Amanda Lenka-Doyle, who like heads up that committee, and Laura
Amanda's
Adler,
wonderful.
like they are like shout outs to them. Like they are, I know that they are deep in it right now while I'm sitting here just talking away. You know, it was a brunch. It was a brunch of a couple of agents and managers and casting directors 35 years ago. It was actually longer, but we calling it our 31st anniversary. It was a little longer than that, you know, and there was just a bunch of people sitting around congratulating each other by buying each other lunch or breakfast or brunch or whatever it is. And now you look at it and it's this big awards show, you know, that everyone talks about. That I should really get on writing a speech for that. But it's a great moment for us, and it's a great moment for us because because people do forget about us, and we don't get an opportunity to be thanked a lot, and we don't hear when the work is good. It's good, and that's great. When the work is not good and an actor has a bad day or doesn't work out on a particular project, we're the first ones to hear about it. The RDOS Awards for me is an opportunity to really like show gratitude to our peers, you know, and be so proud of the work they do. You know, people will say to me, "What's the one show you wish you had cast that you didn't cast?" And I'm like, none of them. Like, I'm so proud of all my friends' shows. You know, I look at like Bialy Thomas. Like, I look at people that I've been here 16 years. You know, and 16 years later, I've watched these casting folk go from zero to hero. You know, and I'm like, and the RDOS Awards is our time to celebrate. You know, to celebrate each other, and really, it's not about winning or being nominated. It's about all of us being in the same room together. At the same time to celebrate each other is like it's so inspiring, you know, and it's, you know, I know some people see it as a networking event and some people whatever. For me, it's not. It's about us being together in one room, you know.
Celebrating one another.
Yeah, celebrating one another because we don't get to do it enough.
Is there a way for people to see the RDOS or to...
So no, not yet.
Okay.
We wish. We talked a bit about doing it as a Facebook Live kind of event or something like that, but we haven't got to that stage yet. You know, we've also had discussions about making it more of awards type show type of an event more than a dinner, but for now it's more of a party and a getting together than an award show. I see the youth on the board right now. I see the energy of this organization, and I look forward to seeing what it turns into in the future. You know, maybe the dinner is becoming antiquated. Who knows? These are just opinions, but it's.
Well, and I ask because I do think it goes to the ignorance conversation that we're having. That I had no clue before I started doing this show that the RDOS was even a thing.
Right.
I didn't know it existed.
Yeah,
that
and
it is a celebration.
But it speaks to us not being able to talk about what we do. You know,
Right.
It's like it's that thing of even still, once casting directors get awards and they get up there, like, we're going to put a clock on you guys. If any of casting directors of our members are listening to this, there's a clock this year, right? Because you're talking about people who've worked so hard on a show for so many years, and this is the first time they get to talk about it. There's a lot to say.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
I'm not, you know, for me, the awards is a public statement, but it's, for me personally, more just it's a party for friends.
Yeah.
You know.
So we're near the end of our time, but I also realized that we haven't really talked about any of your projects specifically.
I've never worked in this town.
This whole hour, this is a great conversation.
I'm so busy talking to you, I haven't done a show. No, I'm just kidding.
So, because I want to be respectful of your time, let's see, what do I have here? I have, we can drill into dark web, which I really dig dark web, by the way. That's straight up my genre. Chance, or Insatiable? Which of those three are you?
Oh, dude, all over the map with them,
Right.
you know. And I wanted like I'm going to launch this in terms of my shows and the shows that I've been lucky enough to work on. Is that it's like I love those three that you mentioned, those three in the same sentence, because they're such different shows.
So different,
you know. And stylistically, I love that. You know, when we start, and I'm going to talk about all three just because you
Great,
sucked me into it.
please.
But you know, when we got onto Insatiable, you know, what a crazy ride that was. You know, and the first we read the pilot, and I was like, what is happening in this?
Right.
And then we met Lauren Gus, and who is just the most incredible mind, you know. And Lauren, like, we were like, I was so anxious at the meeting to get the job, because I was like, I don't want to come in with the wrong pitch here. And then she started to talk about what the show was to her, and it was like it was like falling in love with someone for the first time. Like, I'm still call her like she's like my sister, you know, falling in love with her on a show that I didn't resonate with me at all, but she came from such an honest, good place, and a place of her. It was her own like personal experience. She was like sharing her life with the world in this crazy way, and I caught it behind her eyes, like during that meeting, and I'm like, okay, I got this. I still have no idea what the show's about.
It's kooky. I mean, and it caught a lot of flack.
It did.
Before it came out,
Right.
and I say that intentionally because it had a girl who was overweight, who got punched in the mouth by a homeless guy, and had her jaw wired shut, and lost a bunch of weight and became this kind of
Beauty pageant queen.
Yeah. And then it went on to be a top performer at Netflix, and I was one of those that was like, is this a little tone deaf? Before it even came out, and sitting down to watch it to prep for interview with you, I get it. I get why it is so popular, because it takes all of those things that everybody was worried about, and it subverts them in such a weird and crazy and whimsical and wonderful way that the messages are the stark opposite of what everybody was freaking out about.
Right. I'm so glad you see that, because it's like when it, and I saw the show go from a CBS CW show to not being picked up to a Netflix show.
Okay.
You know, so I
Did
saw
that change the tone?
So yes, I saw that kind of transition. I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting, you know, and I didn't. For a moment, we thought it could live and breathe on the CW, and then it didn't, you know. And we very much understood why, you know, one of the big scenes in the pilot was about anal cancer, and the CW doesn't necessarily want to talk about anal cancer during the pilot, you know. And
Which is exactly what they're talking about in the show that nobody wants to talk about.
When it ended up on Netflix, you know. And I started to see what was happening in the trades. I was like, oh, please, if we could just, like, and I wasn't, by then, because the show was shooting in Atlanta, and New York casting team was taking on the show, you know, and so we lost it, sadly. But I know Lauren, and I was like, please get her on the air right now. Get her on the air and let her tell the story she told to us at that pitch meeting, because that's what no one heard. No one was hearing, you know. And I was like, please let them see those two sparks that I saw in the first meeting with Lauren, because you got it wrong, because she's ridiculously funny, and she's way out there, and if you're not you have to open heart, open mind, you know, and then you'll get it. And I just saw closed minded. I saw people jumping onto taglines. I saw people shredding the show, going, you've misinterpreted the entire thing, you know. And then it found its own space, as shows do, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a really wonderful show. I highly recommend people check it out. You've got a great cast in it, too.
Thank you. I'm so proud of that cast.
Debbie Ryan is so good, and Alice Roberts. You got Beverly D'Angelo showing up. You got
and then little
Alyssa
Kimmy Shields, who's like Kimmy is like my pride and joy of casting, because that role was written completely not Kimmy, and we talked them into hiring Kimmy because I needed to see someone like Kimmy on screen. You know, and originally that role was written for someone heavy set. It was the heavy set best friend, you know, who may or may not be gay, you know. And then Kimmy came in one day on a Saturday, I remember, and I was like, wait a minute, who is this girl, you know? And then had to say to the producers before I brought Kimmy in, you know, okay, we're going to see, before I bring in the next girl, don't fire me. You need to just stay calm. But just everyone stay calm, and Kimmy walked in, and most of the room was like, ugh. And I'm like, don't fire me.
Give it a minute.
And Kimmy started, and 3 lines in, they were like, I could just see him. I could feel the energy in the room shift, you know. And Kimmy walked out, and they were like, "We have to have her." And I'm like, "I know you do. Let's do it." You know.
Yeah.
And then selling it at the network and the studio and the network, and getting everyone else on the same page. And by the time we did, it was a big fight. And by the time we got Kimmy, you know. And I'm like so proud of that work.
And then they lean into her being
and then it's
the
like,
character.
"Oh well, Kimmy Shields was the best idea we ever had." I'm like, "Yeah, she was."
There goes again.
I screened. I think we screened 70 actors the day that Kimmy walked in. It was a Saturday, and we had 2 rooms running, and we were just actors, and in walked Kimmy, and she's still the best idea you guys ever had. But I'm just kidding. I love you guys. If you're listening, I love you. Yeah.
So of those other ones, you've got Chance, which is a series that focuses on a forensic neuropsychiatrist, Dr. Eldon Chance, living in San Francisco, who's kind of pulled into a dangerous life. Created by Alexandra Cunningham and Kim Noon.
Mm-hmm.
And it stars Hugh Laurie, who I adore for everything that he's ever done.
Wonderful, gracious, incredible actor.
Incredible performer.
I have so much time for that man, and he had so much time for us, which I appreciated. You know, we didn't do the first season of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Linda Lowy did the first season of the show, and then we were very lucky to get the second season of the show, and you know, and we'd heard, you know, oh, Hugh Laurie, you know, and then in walked Hugh, and he's just a straight shooter. He's like, don't bullshit him, just talk to him like a human being, and let's get the work done, you know. And for those people who don't, they have a really tough day at the office with him. And for those of us who do, we had a great time. You know, he's an incredibly talented actor and an incredible human being to work with.
Well, and he's an EP on the show as well.
Correct, yeah.
So does that mean he is weighing in on these casting conversations?
So he wasn't, by season 2, he wasn't as much as I think he would like to have been. So he didn't. There were a couple of roles that he did come into the room and requested to be in the room on. But generally, by season 2 of a show, the mechanics of a show are so in place that, you know, unless it takes
people can step back and not feel that
yeah,
need.
we kind of get the vibe of it. It's why I always feel sorry for guest directors when they come onto an episode of a show, because they just walk into someone else's house, and then they kind of have to ask if they're allowed to wash the dishes or pick up a glass or move anything around. You know, it's, you know, in a whole different home where you know, someone else probably makes your bed.
It's a show that I really enjoyed. And I have to mention Ethan Suplee in this show, just because he's...
Oh, I wish Ethan was my idea, and he wasn't. But Ethan was, because I know the story with Ethan, and then I went on to cast him in a little independent film that I hope is going to do some tremendous business. You know, Ethan also the sweetest guy on the planet. But Ethan was, as far as, and for anyone listening who knows the story better than I, you're welcome to be like, meh, no. But it was a last minute casting. It was a last minute. Finding him was like right at the last minute, as I was told. They'd gone up to San Francisco. They were already prepping in San Francisco, and they still didn't have that role. And the story I heard was that they had to fly Ethan, I think, up from LA, and they met in a hotel room, and he was hired like the day before, the week before shooting, like on a whim. And again, that role wasn't anything physically like Ethan, as far as I was told.
I was curious about that.
You know, that it was a completely different.
And it's so far out of his, like, he's done a lot of things. Ethan is one of my favorite. I've known his work since I was a child. For some reason, he's always stuck out to me. And it's kind of out of his wheelhouse to be this, and it's such an important role in the show.
And he was so good in it. You know, I mean, just watching it, having the privilege to sit at a table where he's like every 2 weeks and watch him work or not work because he so seamlessly did it, you know. That's like a real treat. Like him, I believe that the Kimmy Shields on Insatiable was like what happened to the casting to Linda when they discovered him and got him that role.
Yeah.
You know, that moment where a casting director really does like switch, have something that everyone goes, okay, this is totally not what we saw, and this is the best part of the show.
Yeah.
Because I really like Hugh Laurie, God bless him. I thought Ethan was his show, you know.
There are moments when he did, and to steal a scene from Hugh Laurie is, I mean, that man has been the sketch show that he did in London is still one of my favorite shows. I adore his work, but to steal the scene from him and to have that presence that Ethan has in this, and to be kind of fucking terrifying, is
Table read after table read where we couldn't carry on with the read because he had just delivered one line.
I love it.
So,
and then I mentioned Dark Web. This is an anthology horror, on Amazon.
and it's so Dark Web is
people
like
should
yeah.
watch. There's
Thank
a
you
lot of
for
good
that.
stuff in it.
Thank you. I
really,
really
dig it.
and Dark Web was a big collaboration. And I'll start by saying that Roxy, one of the directors and writers of one of the pieces. Roxy and I have a long history. The movie that I just mentioned now that I just wrapped the deal memo on as I was coming here is a Roxy movie. She's a powerhouse, man. She's on fire and she's gonna win Academy Awards. Like, just watch that space, And it's why I've stuck around with Roxy for years. I don't even know when it was when we first started working together, but this is our 5th or 6th production together. And then she bought. What had happened is we did a movie called The Tribe, and I introduced her to an actor called Michael Nardelli, who played a role on The Tribe, and then Michael met Roxy and had this love fest, and then he brought Roxy in to do Dark Web, and she was like, well, we're bringing Russell back with us, right? And he was like, oh yeah, Russell, yeah, let's do that,
I love it. There's some loyalty. There's
of course it's a family.
Yeah.
I mean, we like a family, and by then they had a couple of the actors that they had in mind, but they listened to me and on with so little budget and we were in this little studio and nowhere.
It couldn't have
We
been a
did
very
it on
big budget.
like $1.50. Like Roxy we bought each other donuts each day just to get through casting sessions. But I try, doing stuff like Dark Web, which is, I thank you for saying that you love it because I do. I try and do as much of that work as I can while carrying on with like network television because it keeps me current and it keeps me familiar with what's happening on the ground,
Well, and it seems like those types of projects, they give you an opportunity to like, because it's an anthology, there's a different lead for every episode. So you have an opportunity to put actors in places as a lead of something more frequently and let them, like, especially there are some actors in the first episode. Was it Brian? Brian.
Yeah.
And Graham Sibley in that first episode is fucking good. He is very good.
It was one of the. I was on fire. It was a good time for me. I was on fire. I was becoming familiar with the trans community. My mind was being opened. I was like, all these things were happening, and and I had the freedom in the room to be like, why don't we do this? Why don't we do a trans woman here? Why don't we do this? Let's do no. Like I was at the peak of my trying to pretend I was Marion Doherty because there was no money and I could just say whatever I wanted,
Right.
And and I think the results show in the show. Is it got the edge that I wanted to have on it, that the whole team wanted to have on it, and I got to sneak some really cool people in there. Gabe Luna, who just come for Wicked City for me, and I was like, Gabe, there's this thing, and he's like, well, I'm gonna be the Terminator. I'm like, no, you're not. Whatever, there was a lot of people that I had become familiar with that did this as a favor, and it was the best favor they ever did to themselves.
Yeah,
I had a couple of them on that show, but. Yeah, it's. I love to do that. I don't because I thought I was going to end up in the independent film world, and then ended up in network television. A director recently said to us, "He's like, you guys have found a really good niche in the network TV world, right?" And I'm like, I'm not sure if that's a compliment, but I'll take it. I'll take it. The projects like Dark Web, and I keep on doing smaller independent stuff. I promised that I would do a short film a year. And just to stay current, and the last AFI short I did, Miller and Son, is now and it's in the running to get an Academy Award for Best Short, And I'm like, I'm doing it to introduce young filmmakers to casting, and I want them to experience what it's like to work with a professional casting director while they're at AFI. So there's no surprises in terms of being a director who doesn't use a casting director in the future, so that they understand why it's so important to have a casting director, to add the layer onto their production that they may feel like they don't need on their production. So I take on a shorter year, and I'm lucky. That's how I got to meet Roxy, and then this AFI short that is right up there with the Academy Award nominees, and I'm like, yes, that's welcome to my world, And Dark Web, which which is doing good business. I hope we get more business out of it. I really do.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful show. I hope that more people watch it. It's hard nowadays. There is so much out there to be able to cut through that. I think is really difficult. But what's great, especially in genre, is that there are built-in audiences for all of these genres, and now there are these niche markets, these niche audiences that you can kind of delve into and make something that wouldn't have been made 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, for that matter.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time. I get concerned that there's a flooding going on, now you see, Disney Plus, and you just see the last couple of weeks is just like Apple TV. I'm like, everyone's streaming, and the whole network's crashed. You know what I mean? I'm just ooh.
You got Quibi coming up soon.
Yeah, Quibi, and I'm like, it's the, like, we used to, a couple of years ago, we were like, oh, it's the Wild West. I'm like, now it's like the Wild West, I hope it doesn't become overwhelming, and it's a pendulum swing.
It is.
This is what it is. Right. I think, it's my opinion, but I think it's another pendulum swing. And I'm not sure where it's going to swing back to is what I can't predict. But I do
it's
think
it's the same thing that happened when, web series became a thing. Right. There was a big swing and everybody was making a web series, and then you had multi-channel networks pop up, and you had Machinima, and you had all these different companies, and then they were like, oh, this is not sustainable. But it became a training ground for a lot of people, and there was a lot of opportunity. So I think you're right. There is that swing to it.
We'll see what happens with it. I think it is that, when people said like 10 years ago, a web series, we were like, I was going to work on a web series. and then it became like this big thing, and now it's gone away again. I just think you're watching, now there's a lot more money being thrown at it. You know what I mean? And now you're watching big what was box office money being thrown into the Wild West. We'll see what happens with it. It's a cool time, and it's an exciting time, and for actors and any filmmakers, it's such an exciting time to be in this business, and across the board in terms of diversity and in terms of being a filmmaker and actor, whatever. It's like the doors are wide open right now. It's really what I do believe, and if there's anyone listening to this who's like, doesn't feel like that's true for them, like just like I always say, just step outside for a minute, make friends, go and talk to people. I say we're in Hollywood. It's like the Olympics of acting. It's the Olympics of filmmaking. Like don't try and do it alone. Go out and find people who want to make movies with you. There's no reason for you not to be working. And I hear it all the time. Like, well, it's easy for you to say because you've had this career. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm the one that stepped out in front of the train like every single time I heard a train coming. Like
as a child, you were stepping out in front of the train.
Please get out there. Get out there and create the content. Do the work. Don't pay your dues and do the work is the best thing I can say to everyone, and even to us cranky old filmmakers. It's the same thing. Go do dark web, do a short film, stay current. You know what I mean? Like, say to a director tomorrow, I don't think you're right. I want Kimmy Shields. I'm not going with your version of it. And because that's how you make art.
Absolutely, contribute.
Yeah.
It can be, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap this up, but where can people follow you online? Can they?
So online, like Twitter is my best.
Okay.
Like Twitter for me seems to be it's become the machine. I to follow and for me to pay attention. I'm precious about Facebook. That's my family space. I'm available on Facebook, but I'm not available for. I don't want to see your show on my family page. Like, oh, there's us at Disneyland and a production of The Messiah.
Let me make sure and tag Russell here.
Like make sure. I love it. It is like, I don't know, unless it's like Peter and the Wolf or something that I can bring my kids to.
Yeah.
Note.
So Twitter, what's the
handle?
Russell
Boast.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's Russell Boast. Yeah.
All right.
You'll find me. You can find me.
And then lastly, where can people find out more information about the CSI and these diversity programs and all this wonderful stuff that you're doing?
CSI, we wish we were the
CSI.
We wish we were the CSI. Like, in fact, here's a fun fact for the world. Because we're becoming more international, we've been talking about like what we would call
Casting
ourselves.
Society International.
Right. And it came up and we were like, well, we would love to be CSI, but we're not going to be CSI. So we still kind of talking about that. I think it's not too far off where we just become the Casting Society, because we are becoming an international organization. We are an international organization. We have 1,000 members worldwide across the globe, South Africa, all over the world. So we are that already. But the Casting Society of America.com, you can find out information there. And then the one for the training program is Casting Society Cares, which is our nonprofit division. If you go to Casting Society Cares, you can find out about the training program, which for the actors listening, it's not for you guys. It's not for you. It's just for people who are interested in 100% wanting to pursue a career in casting. It's not demystifying the casting process. There's other.
That's this podcast.
That's what. Yes, listen to this podcast. Everyone you haven't heard, just listen to this. But go to Casting Society Cares, because we also do things like Heal the Bay, and we do a bunch of giving back kind of projects where we just invite whoever wants to come with us, and packing toys for Christmas, or giving putting goods together for the homeless, or whatever it is. That's a great community of all of us working together.
All right, everybody, thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
Cool, no problem.
We hope that you have enjoyed this episode of Placing Faces. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, love, heart, thumbs up, and share this episode. We would love for you to like us, and we would like a thumbs up. Maria Perry, the greatest producer in the world to ever produce, thank you so very much. Now a quick word from Miss Perry.
Hi, I'm Maria Perry, the producer of Placing Faces, and I'm just popping in to let you know that you can now find and support Placing Faces on Patreon. This podcast is a labor of love, and that means our production cycles are slower than we'd like when our day jobs get in the way. We're hoping to be able to get one more person involved and make the editing process a little quicker. And when you support us, you can join the community that we're building, find out who we'll be talking to next, submit questions, and vote in polls about upcoming episodes. So find us on Patreon or check our website for a link at www.placingfaces.com.
Placing Faces is powered by Collaborator.com, a media production service connecting media professionals to companies, brands, and agencies, allowing you to scale your production based on your needs, connecting companies and creatives seamlessly. We would also like to thank our partners at the Casting Society of America, and congratulations to all of you RDOS Award nominees, and winners if you're listening to this after the 30th. The Casting Society of America is a hub of information about this branch of the film industry. To learn more about the society and what it takes to get into casting, you can visit www.castingsociety.com. Thank you all so much for listening, and until next time, be well.